Hello, Changemaker.
Welcome to the Innovation Room.
A place for business leaders,
Change agents and change champions.
anyone who wants to know where digital transformation is taking us,
A place that sparks ideas.
and explores what's really possible with software and technology.
Ready?
Let's see what's happening.
Welcome to the Innovation Room podcast. Our lens today is focused on a cornerstone of our society, schools. We are diving into the landscape of the UK schools in the age of artificial intelligence. It's not just about lessons in classrooms anymore. It's about life lessons for us as a society. The integration of AI into educational paradigms is redefining stakeholder expectations across the board, from pupils who might soon view AI as their learning companion, to parents balancing the merits of tech immersion with traditional teaching, and educators whose role is fast evolving beyond imagination, with little time or resources or even a skill set to act fast enough. The answers are complex and unfold at the intersection of technology, culture, policy, and yes, even emotion. We aim to uncover global trends and sentiments to project a coherent vision of evolving expectations from schools. My guest is a digital learning and innovation expert with 20 years of experience as a teacher and a leader in education. Laura Knight is passionate about developing innovative and inspirational practice that creates successful and supportive learning communities and brings people together in high-functioning teams to influence positive change. I am Somayeh, CEO of Geeks. Please join me in the Innovation Room with Laura Knight to discuss the future of schools. Hi, Laura. Thank you so much for joining me in the Innovation Room. Shall we start with an introduction of yourself, please?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for having me. It's lovely to be with you today. So my name is Laura Knight and I am senior consultant at Berkhamsted School. I am a teacher of 20 years. I still teach now, but I also work with organisations and institutions looking to work on digital innovation, transformation and AI.
You're a wonderful, wonderful guest to have because you still teach and you transform schools and you're a technologist,
That's right.
which makes you wonderful guest. Before we get into how we are going to imagine the future of schools with AI, we do have a tradition in the Innovation Room, which is we ask our guests if they want to bring somebody to the Innovation Room, who would that person be, dead or alive, fiction or real, and you can have more than one if you really, really want to.
Okay, thank you. So actually the first person who came to mind was Alan Turing, because I'm sure he's probably been mentioned before, but I feel like he was often misunderstood as a human at the time in which he was creating, and I think he would be a fascinating person to talk to. I'm really interested in his ideas and his approach, but also as a fellow neurodivergent human, I think we probably would share some interesting chats too. So yeah, I would like to bring Alan, please.
Wonderful, wonderful. Cool. So if we this series we have launched is about future of different businesses, and we want to talk about future of schools, and we might focus on future of schools in the UK because that's your expertise are, and that's what we are trying to focus to make a more meaningful conversation, because it could go very, very wide. So within the context of the UK, we want to focus this episode. We want to focus on what is the expectation of the future of the schools. And when we talk about expectation, we talk about every stakeholder that could be interacting with the school, including pupils themselves, their parents, very important, the teachers, the school staff, anybody else that would be considered the stakeholders. And you're a technologist yourself, you understand the technology space, and you have been very active in the AI advancements and the impact of it on the schools. So what is your general view on how the expectation of the stakeholders are changing from the schools?
Sure. So I think this is a really interesting space. We know that the arrival of generative AI in the sort of, I suppose, the popular consciousness has really had a big splash. And there have been lots of folks reflecting on what that could mean for education. Educationalists in the UK are actually a very innovative bunch, but things don't necessarily move at the same speed that they do in more commercial environments, for good reason. Teachers want to do the right thing by their students, and they want to make sure that when they commit to something, it's going to work. You only get one chance to do that year at school, so it's absolutely right that we should take a little care. But I think what's really interesting is how we are considering the intersection of humanity and technology in the education space, and what that means when you can leverage technology in new ways. So as far as artificial intelligence is concerned, there are some really interesting explorations in terms of teaching and learning and how we can support learning for young people, particularly thinking around accessibility, for example, for students with different learning needs, thinking about how we can leverage technologies such as generative AI for broadening opportunities for creativity, for example, personalising learning. But there's also so much scope for supporting teachers with productivity. And I think that's something that we mustn't forget, actually. There's lots of jazz hands and all singing or dancing in the classroom, but actually teachers are fundamentally incredibly busy humans, and anything that we can do to help them with their heavy lifting outside of the classroom, particularly when it comes to data analysis, insights, that kind of piece, that's going to be really valuable as well. So teachers are looking to AI for solutions to problems that already exist and that they know exist, but also they're also looking to understand the art of the possible and what can actually be achieved with these new tools that remain as yet relatively undefined in this new and exciting space.
Mm. Is there anything that you would think of that we technologists might be thinking about that you think the stakeholders wouldn't want? Say, for example, if you ask me as a technologist what the school should look like or what we could do, I can come up with loads and loads of ideas that can be implemented. But as somebody who's teaching still, who is in the system, is there anything that you could highlight that you think, no, they don't want this? Like, it's so hard to go and implement.
Absolutely. So there's a couple of things that as technologists we can get carried away with, where we imagine the individual using the tool and flying and doing brilliant things with it. But it's very easy to forget the importance of the collective experience in education and how social learning is, but also how important the relationships are between students and between students and their teachers. So I think what we have to remember is the AI tools that we create and introduce into the education space must respect the importance of relationships, how key motivation and understanding and subject knowledge is for teachers who have that deep pedagogical skill. We don't need to undermine that, and we shouldn't be aiming to. They don't need replacing, they need augmenting. And that's where the key is for me. So yeah, relationships at the heart of it.
Very, very interesting. What are the fears that you have seen from maybe from parents? Maybe start from there, because I don't necessarily hear a lot about what parents expect from the future of schools.
So in terms of AI, I think there are a couple of key fears, and they are reasoned. This is not the sort of sci-fi style hype anxiety that we're seeing in the press. That's not what I'm talking about here, although there is some of that in the cases where there's less understanding about what AI actually is. And perhaps we could all do a favor to the wider community by using appropriate metaphors and visual imagery when we're talking about artificial intelligence and not presenting people with frightening looking robots. That would be really great. So in terms of fears, both from a parent and a teacher perspective, so I'm also the parent of a 10-year-old, so this is on my mind in that sense, as well as the students that I teach in my classroom. And there are a couple of key things. I think, first of all, I worry about manipulation. We are remembering that artificial intelligence is arriving into a world of a pre-existing social media landscape and an attention economy that young people are very used to. And we've essentially become habituated to being manipulated, to being quite passive about how we use some of these tools, and being part of a mysterious algorithm, and maybe even being quite nonchalant or even dismissive of that. And I worry that young people are going to become increasingly cynical or indifferent about the value of truth and sincerity and integrity in those spaces where those I suppose it becomes disingenuous, and there isn't necessarily a clear idea about whether something is real, whether it's authentic, whether it's true. So that integrity and manipulation piece matters a lot. I think there's a problem with bias. There's no doubt about that. So, and we know that bias is baked into us as humans, but it's also baked into a lot of the generative AI platforms that we're experiencing. And it's so important that young people have a sort of a sense of discernment and confidence about how they are consuming media and consuming the product of artificial intelligence, that they can see that, identify it, challenge it, push back against it. So that, to me, is really, really important.
So
I think
what would you say? What would you say we should do? We should do differently. And we are slightly deviating. That's a slight tangent, but I think it's a very important tangent, because we do have experience of technology in a school. So we do have experience of computers coming into the school system. We do have the experience of internet coming to the school system, and we do have the experience of social media and mobiles coming to this. So we do have the experience of a school being disrupted by something that they didn't plan to
Definitely.
have.
Definitely.
So what are the lessons?
That they haven't necessarily had a great deal of control about. So the lessons in the mix for all of that are about agency. So often those things have come into school perhaps from home, from personal devices, from outside of the control of the school. And actually, if we're here in this space and the school is taking a level of control about which tools they use, it's going to be so important that we explicitly teach digital literacies to pupils. And that they are given a really strong grounding in how these tools work, what they can and can't do, and how to get the best from them, and really understanding where their weaknesses as much as their strengths are, so that they don't see them as some kind of magical, mystical oracle, because that's really, really key. We've got unhealthy relationships with AI already happening on social media platforms like Snapchat. So students creating relationships with a virtual friend that they almost are, they're manipulated into this false sense of intimacy, this synthetic intimacy, that is designed to hook them in and keep their attention, but isn't actually coming from a place of any genuine relationship. It's simply, false. So digital literacy, a real understanding of what the tools are, as much for adults as for children. So that
what's your views on? Because I have a challenge of creating a balance. I see a very big challenge in the school setup, because I see every business, every institution as a business, being a business person. So I see the government. When I'm asked about the government, I'm like, government is a type of business. Citizens are the customers. So schools is a business. You have parents as their main customers, and then you have secondary customers, and so on and so forth. So within the challenge of a school is you have massive, huge generational gap between the students and their parents and teachers. And we are used to living life in a certain way that they are not going to be living that life. And this has been traditionally for thousands of years. This is what the schools did. We prepared students for a life that we don't necessarily have a great understanding of what is it going to be looking like. So in principle, that's not different. The only difference is this new life is happening so fast and is so different to what we know, that is it's kind of like it terrifies me of the responsibility we have to educate and prepare them. And we know students being younger, being native digitals, and now they are becoming native AIs. How do you like their approach to technology is very different to our approach to
It is, but
technology.
I think there's also some stuff to say about that, and I'm going to push back gently on the idea of the native, because actually don't think it's a very helpful term. I think that if we make presumptions about what students or what pupils or children know, it kind of gives them a privilege that they haven't necessarily earned. They don't have the schema, the intellectual understanding, the life experience to make good decisions on the web. They might be able to shoot a video with a lovely filter on it, but it doesn't mean that they have any depth of understanding about it. And so sometimes we can give too much credit to young people about their digital skill.
Maybe
And
maybe
so,
let's make it clear. By native, I don't mean they're experts. By native, I mean they don't know the world before it.
that's
So
true.
they
That's
don't know
definitely
the
true.
world that there was no social media. They don't know the world when
And
there was.
there's now a sort of a 2 generation gap between those young people who are sort of arriving in their early teens or late, slightly younger than that, and their parents, because their parents, for the most part, would not have had a social media infused childhood. There might have been some Facebook by the time they were a little older, but they didn't grow up with that same mobile interface and all of that kind of thing. So not only have they had the social media generation experience, but now they're going to have this AI enabled experience too, and I think that gap is widening. So there already was an existing generational gap, and I think that is now growing. However, I think we should have higher expectations of millennial parents and the generations following them, because they have had more parallel experiences. The gap is
But
much
I completely agree with that, because the new parents are going to be having more expectations of the school. So what do you think now the challenge of a school is in meeting that demand from the parents? Because if the schools had, say, 10 years to do something before, now that 10 years is 1 year, because the parents know so much, so they expect so much so earlier.
and they're right to expect so much. But I think the challenge for schools is going to be all about balance. It's going to be about harnessing the tools effectively, articulating why and how tools are being used safely and appropriately for young people to the families, and then striking the right balance to ensure that parents are reassured, I guess. That now there's going to be a range of experience for parents and of views, from all the way from I never want my child to use any technology at all to why aren't you doing more, and there will be every sort of shade in between. And so it's about finding a reasoned, research-led approach as a school that helps articulate your mission. Now, my view is, if you lead with learning and you choose the right tool for the job, the best tool for the job, and you teach children how to use it well, we can achieve great things. And sometimes the best tool for a job is a pencil or a whiteboard pen. Not everything has to be digital in order to be good. That's not at all true. But there are many, many opportunities for digital to transform teaching and learning, and to build engagement, to build capacity, to all sorts of interesting things. So it's about reasoned decision making, strategic leadership, ensuring that leaders have the right policies in place, the right structures in place, the right platforms and processes. And that's going to mean that teachers are empowered to make good choices.
So given that, so I think we've established a big expectation is everybody expect more from teaching and learning to be more accessible, more personalized, and more according to the needs of or the situation that the students are going to be in or need to be prepared in the future. So we know that's the expectation. So they need to, schools and whoever is involved with the schooling system needs to think about this is an expectation we can't ignore. How about assessments? That's a controversial a bit.
It's so interesting. It's so interesting. And I kind of love that there's a controversial aspect to this, because for the first time, we are going to see real disruption in the assessment space that has been stoically resisting change for so long. And actually, I would even go as far as to say, and I'm really sorry, colleagues and friends who work in that particular part of the sector, but it's held everything back. If assessments are paper and pen, children sitting in a row on the 6th of June, and there is no other way of doing it, everything that you do leading up to that point has to direct children to that moment of success. And so often that drags us back to 19th, 20th century approaches instead of allowing any sort of flexibility or innovation. I think that we are overdue some really positive disruption in the assessment space. And I am delighted that AI is going to allow scope for much more adaptive, just-in-time approaches, for example.
What do you think the expectations are? What do different stakeholders expect the assessments to become?
Well, I think there is right now a real sense of, well, something's going to have to be done, because the integrity of assessments is hugely important. In the British education system, where we take so much pride in our examinations, our public examinations, and our approach to qualifications, existing in a time when those could be undermined is really uncomfortable. And so there's going to need to be some quite radical change in order to maintain that integrity. But right now, so for example, coursework in the age of AI suddenly becomes a really difficult thing to police, to proctor, in terms of, just whose work is it, and to what extent are we going to have children collaborating with AI or not. So there's some complex questions to answer about mechanics of examinations, but I think also there's some questions to answer about the entire ethos of a system that requires you to consolidate and concentrate everything you can know and can do into a 2-hour window on a Tuesday in June. That, for me, isn't sustainable, and it isn't representative of what life beyond school looks like.
That's a very interesting point you're mentioning, because it's not just that it sounds a bit ridiculous, and we all have done it. Without questioning, because that's what we knew and that's what the system was.
And that's what there was, right? Yeah.
You do so much work, and then there is one day in the year, and if you feel good or bad, or whatever, like, this is that day that defines your
Absolutely.
next year, or where you end up, or
it's coming whether you're ready or not. Your whole class, your whole year group, your whole cohort across the whole country, you're doing maths or geography or German at that time. And I think that there are better ways of meeting children's needs and getting better results, because fundamentally I'm coming at this from the perspective where I want children to do the best that they can do and young people to flourish. And we all know, as individuals, we grow and develop in our own time. And I think the lack of flexibility doesn't serve young people, it serves the system. Now, if we can flip that on its head and say, okay, how can we build something more adaptive, something more flexible, something more personalised that allows us to maintain integrity and ensure that the examination, the qualification, is really respected and valued, that the learning pathway towards it is meaningful and purposeful and is going to help that child learn. And then at the end of it, you get to do the thing that means you achieve what you deserve to achieve. And if that takes you 6 months, amazing. If it takes you 2 years, amazing. Shouldn't be a problem. And I forget which wonderful Scandinavian country it is, that where there are quite a few examinations that you just literally rock up to the post office when you're ready to take it and they proctor them for you there. Like, just, that's just normal. It makes me wonder, like, we can do this for driving tests. Why couldn't we do it for A-levels?
Well, that even go further than that. I would expect, if I was going to go to school, or I had a kid who was going to school, I would want to know during the whole year or over the years, I want to know how this kid is improving their learning of maths. We put aside to should you learn maths or not at the age of 8. We just put that's a whole different conversation, what we should be learning. But assume that we need to learn what we're learning maths today. I was more interested to see what kind of trend my child is on, and are they, for example, if they started strong in the first half of the year but they are plateauing, I want to know that. I don't want to know what the school is doing about it, rather than not knowing anything and then learning at the what was the date? 6th of June.
Yeah, whatever it is.
This is
Okay,
this
an arbitrary day. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And as a parent, and I think as an employer or as a higher education provider, I would be really interested in seeing trends, seeing insights, seeing analytics that give me much more than a snapshot of that child's learning experience. But I want to see their journey. And I want to see the milestones along the way. That, for me, would be really empowering. And it would also show you so much about children who don't have the easiest time and succeed despite adversity, because I think that shows real grit. And if we can find a way of celebrating that resilience, even better.
Yeah. What would you think the views of teachers are about that? Are they open to that? Because I see that becoming, if I put my, my and a pessimistic hat on, I would be like, oh, that would expose the not so well performing teachers a lot.
Well, I think anything that involves a systemic change is hard, right? Especially when you have honed your professional craft over many years. That's going to be a difficult shift to make in this space. So being understanding about the human nature of that, how much teachers give of themselves, I think there's going to need to be a really high standard for any change that happens. Teachers want the best for young people, and head teachers are keen to ensure that their experience is of the highest quality. Where standards are not high, any systemic change, especially digital innovation, digital innovation is a wonderful lever for positive, improvement, and to raise standards. So this is actually, I think, an opportunity to do that and to make teaching and learning standards, kind of give everything a boost. I think that's a really positive thing. But there will be colleagues who find that kind of change challenging, and rightly so, because it could be unsettling. So I think reasoned and measured, well researched, thoroughly tested, that's going to be reassuring to colleagues. Anything that feels rushed or kind of knee jerk, that's going to get instant rejection, I suspect. And there will be lots of schools who will. I think one of the other things that could happen here is a splintering, if you like. We've seen it already with IGCSEs versus GCSEs. Some schools now not taking GCSEs anymore and doing their own internal qualifications. I think we're going to see more fracturing and alternative qualifications and different approaches coming through, which might add further complexity or flexibility into the mix, not sure which yet. So
probably both, because flexibility is the other side of the coin, is complexity. The more flexible you make the system, the more complex the system is becoming. And we know the reason AI is such an attractive technology is because it can deal with the complexity and create crazy flexibility in a way, in a scale and in a way that we humans can't really do with that. How about creativity? What's the expectation? I assume there is a lot of, maybe AI is under pressure to deliver more creativity for the pupils in the school.
So I don't know that it's a pressure. I think the way that I see it is it's a real opportunity to democratize creativity in a way, to make the creative.
What do you mean by that?
You don't need a high level of skill in photography or image manipulation or poetry construction in order to produce beauty in the way that you might have done 20 years ago. And actually that makes creative output more available to everyone through AI than it has been before. Now, there are some really complex issues around intellectual property here. And I think that the education space is no different from anywhere else, where the idea that intellectual property that has been taken unethically for training models to learn from is going to be problematic, and academic content may well have the same issues. So I think there's amazing possibilities for young people to have access to creative tools, whether that's visual or text-based or audio, that is really inspiring and will open up doors of expression for them that are just brilliant. I think that's going to be amazing. But I also think there are some complexities there. And there's a question around skill. There is something important about learning the skill of creation, of crafting something yourself that teaches you all sorts of things beyond the actual act. And I worry a little bit that if it's very easy to shortcut the hard work, the heavy lifting, the intellectual struggle, the practice that it takes to be good at something, anything that requires additional effort or skill will become outsourced. And that for me feels like it's a shame, because are we skilling ourselves? Are we losing something as people by not learning those things anymore because AI can do it? So yeah, I think I have a mixed opinion. There's lots of positivity. There are also some questions about things to be guarded.
There is an element of when I give that example, like when I'm presented with that kind of question, there is an element of there are so many things we don't know how to do that our grandparents knew how to do, but there's so many things we know how to do that they can't even imagine being done. So it's like trade-off of, we are going to lose some of the abilities to do some of the stuff that was so normal for some people to do it. But then that's how world evolve.
Yeah.
With technology, you will lose some of the skills that are not going to be needed.
And I think it's maybe just a case of being intentional around that, and so that we don't look back and go, my gosh, we've lost all of this, and perhaps humanity is impoverished in some way, or that would be a shame. So I think making wise choices there and being intentional.
I think one of the expectations that, again, if I was a parent or even if I was a student, I wanted to see the schools make would have been, when they all have like art exhibitions that they put on display the wonderful things that students do. I want to see like a digital format of that, not necessarily like on a website or something, in the school, like with the screens, then the students AI generated whatever a form of art, because I'm very curious to see what the minds of children can produce and how they put things together.
And we should think about it as a collaborative effort. AI doesn't produce things spontaneously without prompting. There is a co-creation aspect to that, and I think it needs honouring. There's something really interesting about that, and I think it'd be great to see what students can create. I mean, if I think about some of my students and their wonderfully eccentric senses of humour, some of them have got like funny approaches to things. I'm sure it'd be hilarious.
Yeah. It would be amazing to get them to just all create like a screenplay, scenario. Use AI, whatever you want to use, like it doesn't matter. But like what you have been able to produce with AI is quite interesting to be able to compare and get them to explain how they have come up with what they have come up with. How about because we all, in all roles we have, we talk about the education gap and making it more accessible to others. Do you see that as an expectation schools need to think about, how they close the educational gap or how they create bridges?
So I think that unfortunately there is scope for AI technologies to widen gaps between children who are more privileged and children who are less privileged in the UK in particular, much like elsewhere. So students who have easy access to high quality devices, who have excellent connectivity in school and at home, who have the ability to access licenses and subscriptions to paid for services that are going to deliver them high quality experiences, are going to fly ahead with this technology. Just because they can, because they have it right there. And there will be lots of children who are not able to access that content, that connectivity, those devices, who are left behind, which I think is a great shame. But I think more worrying for me behind that is that there is going to be a two-tier system where there will be free to access tools and paid for tools, which are quite distinct in terms of the quality of experience you have and also what's happening with your data. I think increasingly we'll see ring-fenced or protected or more private kind of options for paid-for tools, so that young people's data and privacy is safeguarded, and that won't necessarily be the case with free-to-the-user tools, where you're more likely to be advertised to or your data be sold on.
Which massively highlights the role of the schools and how they can do that, because there is that saying of technology happens because it can. So if we can't do anything about these new paid for tools to exist, and the more privileged families be able to make them available for their children, but definitely the ones, I completely agree, definitely the ones who don't have the means to access those, we're gonna see a massive gap between them.
I think there will be a growing gap, and I think that there are a couple of solutions to that. The first is about policy, and I'm sure we'll get to that, and so we won't dig into it in a big way here, but I would like schools to think really strategically about it. And my excellent colleague and friend Mark Anderson and I have recently written a policy framework for schools that's free to use, and it's available online, so do connect with me on LinkedIn to find it there. So just as a thinking sort of template, if you like, to help school put something in place. But then I think actually we should be thinking bigger about how do we create tools that do not widen those gaps? What is it we can ensure in this space that actually is more inclusive and is more engaging and flattens the hierarchies, not deepens them?
Isn't it even a level above that? Isn't it how even schools are engaging with this? Because if they are not even engaging, they won't even go to those deeper thoughts of like, okay, what should we create? So I'm thinking more of how many of, and you would be able to answer that a lot better than me, because you're in the system, you're teaching, you're hanging out with teachers. How many of the schools in the UK are having serious conversations and having it in their, how many of them even have a digital evolution roadmap to evolve to the next version of what their schools should look like? And if they don't, is it not the biggest problem we need to address?
Well, because yeah, absolutely. So we have to go back a step to what is the roadmap? What is the digital strategy? What is the approach? That is definitely a precursor to what are we going to do about AI in our school. So I think there is a real mixture nationally of schools at various different stages of development, some who are kind of iterating on real positive schemes and approaches, and others who are for the first time thinking, gosh, we really need to move through this now, and others for whom resources are so lacking that and they've had everything thrown at them recently with all sorts of costs, like not least we've got this crisis with concrete and pensions and cost of living and energy, that it may well be that AI feels like a luxury right now, and quite understandably so. Like if the roof is falling in, then you need to focus on the roof. So finding affordable ways to for young people to access these tools would be something that would be wonderful to see. So anyone who's thinking, yeah, we can charge £30 a head for this or whatever it is, like that's not the way we should be doing things. But it may well be that actually something philanthropy funded is the answer, and that we need to think differently about how we reach young people with these tools, because I think it's going to be a rite of passage into a successful working life. And we already know that there's this sort of AI and digital underclass who are increasingly disenfranchised and excluded from professional opportunity. Yeah. And I would hate for that to be allowed to continue.
Yeah, me too. To summarize what we talked about, we focused on the expectations of the schools of the future. We covered that, from teaching and learning, everybody expects more personalized, more contextualized kind of learning and teaching engagements. We talked about assessments, which is our favorite topic, that they need to change. There is no way that it can stay the same. There are so many examples of that. It's hilarious. Especially the way pupils, they are going around the system wonderfully. Yeah. And I'm like,
the creativity is outstanding. Yeah. But really,
absolutely. Absolutely. So we know everybody expects more creativity in the school, more opportunity to be more creative. And we discussed the danger of the educational gap becoming wide, although there are so many opportunities for it to close down, but there is a massive danger of it becoming massively big if schools don't do something about it. And then we slightly touch on the ethics and what we expect it to be safe. And so expectations are a lot. And we know that if the message is, if the schools don't engage now, yesterday even, if they don't engage with it properly, although there might be so many other things that seems more urgent, I would say, and this is your chance of disagreeing with me, I would say they would face existentialist threat of a school won't even be relevant if they don't do something about it, if they don't engage with it properly, and then they would lose their students to those who are engaging, because AI has the capacity to make stronger, if that makes sense.
No, I hear you. I think for me, it's more about being part of the conversation and ensuring that school leaders, system leaders, regional leaders have agency and help define the future and write the roadmap, rather than playing catch up with it. We all have deeply specialist knowledge about what it means to really push for success for the young people we work for and that we serve. And so it would be a shame not to be part of that conversation. And I think I would like to encourage everybody, even the least technical, to be part of this conversation and help define that roadmap, because that's one of the most important things we can do, is to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. And as from business point of view, we know we can create the best product. If the user doesn't want it, nobody buys it, and then you're not having a business. I don't see that being any different from a school. So I totally agree with you. If we have a way of understanding what the users of the schools, what all the stakeholders expect, and then respond to that expectation and educate them along the way of the possibilities, that's definitely the way to go.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important to listen to teachers and empower teachers to share their experiences and to solve real problems with teachers rather than for them. Yeah. We know what the challenges are in our classroom, and it's so wonderful when tech companies engage in those conversations and are really connected, because those are the products that thrive. So trying to I don't think the problem is not the right thing.
No, I don't think anybody wants a school without teachers in. We all love the teachers. We just want them to do their job easier and better and be happier doing that.
Yes, indeed.
Wonderful. Laura, I'll finish here. We will catch up in the next episode and the final episode on different aspects of this. I look forward to having that chat with you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us in the Innovation Room.
We hope it sparks some ideas.
Want to learn more about what we do?
Maybe you could even be our next guest.
And spark some ideas yourself.
Find us at Geeks Limited.
And join us again soon.
Because real change never stops.